Hey, Eagles fans, this is Mike Kaye from NJ Advanced Media. Welcome to the No Huddle Show podcast, where we discuss anything and everything Philadelphia Eagles. You can read our content on NJ.com/Eagles, bookmark that, and you can subscribe to our exclusive Eagles Insider Text service, where we'll break news, give you insider observations, and provide in-depth analysis. Through Eagles Extra, you can send questions and comments directly to us, and we'll respond to your phone. With me today, as always, is my fellow Eagles beat reporter, Chris Franklin. Today, we're going to discuss the Eagles' loss to the Browns, the ongoing Doug Peterson, Carson Wentz saga, and we'll try to, sift through this lack of triumph and try to find some truffles, some guys that stood out in this Week 11 loss. I know that's not really, that's not really what you came for. You came for the hardcore, in-depth, ripping of a team that looks just completely awful. But we're going to try to find some positives in this whole little thing. Anyway, Chris, with that said, how you doing today?
I'm still trying to wrap my hands around how this team still was able to go ahead and keep the score kind of close, but still yet look so bad. I mean, it feels like we're back in the mid '90s, watching the Eagles in the mid '90s. Man, how are you doing?
I mean, fine. I mean, look, it's one of those things where covering this team is just. They find new ways to lose every single week, and even those new ways feel similar. It's one of those things where I think the Eagles just aren't a very good football team. I mean, I thought the defense played very well for 3.5 quarters. The offense really didn't do much to, pay it forward, and this was just one of those games. Look, gross weather. They couldn't put a whole game together. Not much to our surprise, and they lost. I mean, the score was 22-17, but really towards the end of that fourth quarter, it never felt that close. They obviously scored. I guess you could call it garbage time, but I feel like no disrespect to anybody, but when the Eagles play, it does always feel like garbage time at this season. And I just look, they're a bad team. You know what I mean? Like, they're a bad team. That's what this team is. They are 3-6-1, and they are every bit the record that they have. Frankly, if you really look at it, outside of their beatdown of Ben DiNucci, they probably could still be, they could be a 1-win team right now. Realistically, you could talk about how close all the other games are, but this is just a bad team right now.
Yeah, the way this roster is currently constructed right now, the way that the poor decision making, I think that's the biggest key. I mean, you look at the way that you look at some of the decisions, whether it be play calling, whether it be the execution on field, or just the lapse in being disciplined, as simple stuff as seems like we talk all the time of jumping off sides or going ahead and not picking up blocking assignments. It's little things like that continue to act like paper cuts and keeps cutting on this proverbial skin of this team. And you would think by now they would have figured this stuff out. And you constantly keep hearing, oh, wow, we got to figure it out. And yet here we are again, talking about the same things over and over again. I mean, how do you fix a lot of this stuff?
I don't know. It seems like there's a lot that needs to be fixed. And that's I think, part of the problem. We're still 6 games. This season still has 6 games left. And, we're all trying to find answers. The Eagles are clearly trying to find answers, because if they had those answers, the product wouldn't be as terrible on the field. Look, I think there is talent on this team. I don't think they're playing as a unit. I don't think that, I brought it up earlier, but there were some really positive moments in this game and positive performances from players. And it's just like, they can't put it together. And look, Doug Peterson has done a really good job of keeping this team together through 10 games. It doesn't seem like they all want to elbow each other and fight each other and all this other stuff. But when you look at stuff like, last year and the year before, he really kept them together, and they felt like an entire team, and they felt like a group. And they fought and they turned things around. I'm wondering if maybe last year was one too many turnarounds, and it delayed some inevitable changes that needed to happen to both this coaching staff and this roster. And now they're paying the price for it. There are some older guys who are still delivering. Jason Kelce's still playing relatively well. Brandon Graham is having a career year. Malik Jackson's played well. Darius Slay, while he's a little bit older, they just brought him in. He's playing well. Lane Johnson's playing well when healthy. It still kind of feels like there are some older dudes on this team that just are around. And there are younger guys who aren't seeing development because of that. But then in turn, you have a quarterback who's in his fifth season and he's regressing to the point where you're like, what do you have here? Because look, if you don't have a quarterback, you don't have a good team. That's basically what it is in the NFL right now. And right now, the Eagles have a bottom five quarterback. Carson Wentz is not playing well. You can get defensive about people saying that he's mediocre all you want. He's been mediocre. He's been bad. He's leading the league in turnovers. He's got 18 turnovers in 10 games. 18 turnovers in 10 games. He leads the league in interceptions. He's taken 40 sacks. His completion percentage has hovered under 60 all season. The Eagles have only won one game by more than 2 scores once. They haven't won a game during the day. They are football vampires, and frankly, they suck. You like that?
That was a good analogy.
You like that? Yeah, but look, Chris, let's start with the quarterback, okay? Because that's where everything starts. The quarterback and the head coach, right? The head coach is billed as this guru and this quarterback expert. They're building a quote unquote, I'm doing the quote fingers, QB factory. It's more like a factory of sadness. And look, Doug Peterson after this game came out and said that he never thought about benching Carson Wentz. He said there's no question that he's the starting quarterback moving forward. Carson Wentz had 2 interceptions in this game. He took 5 sacks, including one that led to a safety. He gave the defense 9 points off a pick 6 and a safety, as you hear my dog scratching away, because it's head scratching to him as well, and he doesn't even speak English. And he doesn't watch football either. He was in the other room with my kid the entire game. But at what point can you here's the thing. I don't want to ask this question because I think you and I are gonna get in this philosophical debate, and maybe it's for the next show. But what's the point where you say, look, enough. This kid needs to reset. You're being benched just to kind of, figure stuff out. Brian Flores benched Tua Tagovailoa today after the kid was undefeated in his previous starts and balling. At some point you have to say, look, this quarterback needs to take a step back, whether he's been playing for 1 year, for 2 games, for 5 seasons, for 12 seasons. You have to reassess. And at this point, they spent a 2nd-round pick on Jalen Hurts. If they saw the upside there and they thought he was that good, why is he not projected to be better than the guy who's leading the league in turnovers and sacks taken through 10 games?
See, the time to bench Carson, even if you did it, was going to be at halftime last game against the Giants. I think there's ways you can go ahead and still have him. You can still bench him and still say he's your starting quarterback. I still think that's very much possible. I wouldn't have mind. Seriously, thought last week was the right time to do that. He could have done it again this week as well too. Could have made the change at least to provide a spark. And I know that he's the quote unquote franchise guy in the eyes of the team, and he's a supposed leader and everything. But you cannot continually go out there and have bad performances and then just excuse it away. There has to be some form of accountability against him. He can't continue to go ahead and throw. I remember Doug said, "Oh, there's no easy throws in the NFL." Well, that was an easy throw, a swing pass, even with a guy face. That should be for a guy who's supposed to be a franchise quarterback, a top 10 quarterback coming into this year that everybody kept saying. That's a throw he has to make. And don't forget the open Jalen Reagor that he had as well too, on that quick corner route. He was open as well too. He just completely missed that. I don't know. I wish I knew what was going through between his ears right now. I don't know if Carson Wentz really is that fragile. His confidence is that fragile at this point right now, where they're afraid that if he's benched, he's basically lost. It reminds me a lot of Joe Flacco. He right now, that whole is he not elite? Well, obviously right now Wentz is not elite, but he reminds me so much of Joe Flacco right now in the middle of his career, and he's only 5 years into, and Wentz is only 5 years into his. It's just I don't know what this, and he keep putting him in positions. We kept hearing Doug smugly say, "Oh, we're going to roll him. We may roll him out. You know, he does well, and we'll get on it." Well, I didn't see that many rollouts today, and look what happened. So they have. We always hear the quarterback and the coach, their careers go hand in hand one another. Well, right now we see the result of what they're doing right now, and it's just flat out not good. It's I mean, would you bench him right now?
Well, here's the thing. Doug Peterson's not going to bench him, right? As long as they've got the lead in the NFC East. But, barring a tie between Washington and Dallas on Thanksgiving and the Giants now losing to the Burrowless Bengals, the Eagles are going to have to beat the Seattle Seahawks, a team that they historically have struggled against for over a decade. For almost a decade, I should say. That like, I mean, the game's at night, so I guess the vampires could strike. I guess like that's
They had
like
a shot.
yeah, and the Seahawks defense is atrocious. That won't mean anything. They still have to put up with DK Metcalf and the ghost of Russell Wilson, and I guess he's the ghost of Christmas past, future, and present. But here's the thing: Doug Peterson, by not benching Wentz, for right or wrong, puts him at risk. There is a target on his back because Howie Roseman and the front office and whoever was in that on that decision, whether Doug Peterson was in on that decision or not, handpicked this kid in the second round to be a contingency plan and an insurance policy for Carson Wentz. That is a fact. There's no other reason to take a quarterback that high. It's a fact. And they did it at the expense of Wentz, who needed more playmakers surrounding him, and instead decided to spend that asset on an insurance plan by saying that benching Carson Wentz would send the wrong message to the locker room and signify that the season is over, is essentially saying that Jalen Hurts is not ready to play, or he's not good enough to play better than the guy who is throwing coughing up turnovers at a league leading rate. That is a bold statement by his inaction, right? So you're saying, look, if Jalen Hurts was that good and you liked him that much and you said to yourself you didn't want another Clayton Thorson and you have him active every single week as the backup quarterback, with Wentz slumping the way he is, playing at an alarmingly terrible level, why not bench Wentz for Hurts? I'm not saying that he's the answer for Seattle, but the defiance of the move does signify that they don't think that Jalen Hurts is ready to play better than Carson Wentz is currently. Because if he was, look, the defense goes up against Hurts on scout team literally every week. The defense played their ass off in this game and had nothing to show for it, largely because Carson Wentz coughed up 9 points. So from there, you would think that maybe some guys on defense, especially some younger guys who might not be used to this type of adversity coming from major programs, say to themselves, well, maybe Jalen Hurts should have a shot. What about Jalen Reagor, who called him his brother, like almost immediately after they were drafted together? This rookie class is very tight, supposedly, and maybe, they would like to see what Hurts has to offer after Carson's, struggled to this point. They don't have any experience with him previously when they have been successful. I just think this locker room, a lot of the older guys here have also seen what Doug Peterson's been able to do with options outside of Carson Wentz, right? And they've been successful. So if those veterans still believe in Doug Peterson, who's to say that they don't believe in him transitioning another quarterback in there to be successful? Like, to me, there's so many reasons why you'd make the move. I get why they're not, but like, you get what I'm saying, right?
Yeah, but I think it was very telling when Brandon Graham had the chance during his post-game press conference. I really thought it was very interesting that he said, well, I'll go, whoever Doug decides to go with, we'll go with. That was a perfect opportunity to go ahead and back up Wentz or throw his full support and Wentz, something like that, where he just said, whatever coach decides to do, that's what we'll go with.
Yeah,
I thought that was very telling.
Not much of an endorsement, right?
Yeah, not at all. Not at all. So you're thinking like, hey, this guy's supposed to have back. He's one of our captains, and you're saying, whatever Doug thinks goes. that's that's a little concerning. And if I'm the defense, I know they'll never come out and say we're upset unless I mean, it'd be nice to say that. But if I'm the defense and I know I'm holding Cleveland down only like 29% third downs, you're holding pretty much that run game in check for most of the day, and then all of a sudden you see the offense is giving up points, and you're sitting back and going, okay, here we go again, try to bail them out. I'm feeling frustrated too. I wonder. I know they say they have those group chats, but there's probably those those separate texts that some guys send to other people and amongst each other, and just go, man, should we stick with Carson, or you think you go on this? You think we're going to ask about this? What we're going to say? It really makes me wonder. It truly makes me wonder what they're saying. If that even on a plane ride home amongst each other, it's bad.
Yeah, I
It's
mean,
bad.
that's not going to be a very fun plane ride, obviously. I mean, look, we should say the Browns did make some big plays. I thought Rashard Higgins played very well in this game. I thought the defense played very well. Olivier Vernon was terrific. He had 3 sacks. There's 2 guys that I really want to talk about outside of Wentz who, excuse me, had their struggles pretty mightily. Jason Peters looked like a shell of himself. He was absolutely just dominated by Adrian Claiborne and Olivier Vernon on that left side. I'm not sure what's going on there. At one point, he had to leave for injury, and then he came back, and then he left again later on the fourth quarter. Doug Peterson said that he didn't bench him. He said that Peters had the injury and just left or moved to the sideline. I just don't know how you continue to play this guy. Look, Jordan Mailata gave up a sack right after he came into the game. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying Mailata's perfect, but if you're going to take your lumps, don't you want to develop with those lumps, especially at 3-6-1?
Well, I think you do. Also, it's tough coming off the bench cold like that. I mean, you can see you can try to get as many mental reps as you can, and just look and say, okay. And then you come in cold, and you got a guy who's going like Olivier Vernon was going, and then you got to go ahead and match that speed and get used to the game speed as you've been sitting standing around. That's tough. I really wonder if he was hurt, if there's another underlying injury that we don't know about again, because he looks like slow. That kickback he usually that the tackles have to go ahead and try to set up in pass protection, he looked a little slow in that. And I think that really go ahead and that's why he gave up a lot of pressures. It was rough to watch. And I question why the Eagles, I don't know why, if Peterson or the other guys made when it came to the adjustments, why not go ahead and have Sanders chip him on the way out to the pass routes? There's a couple times where I think on a couple of Vernon sacks where Sanders was going out to be the outlet. Why not throw a shoulder in real quick if it looks like Peters is getting beat by that? There little things like that start to add up, and I'm shocked that they didn't go ahead and do it. But at this point, I mean, if Peters has another injury whatsoever, I mean, you can't if you put him on IR, he's done for the year. But I don't think they'll ever do that to him unless it's something major. But you never thought you go ahead and see you need help with that. And I'll admit this now, I wanted Peters in there, and I still wanted him to go ahead and be that left tackle because he showed like he was okay. But today he proved me wrong big time. It was disappointing to see that. And I don't know what other moves you can really make. And I mean, you can move Mailata, but you have Lane Johnson who's having his issues when it comes to injury. So this depth and this offensive line, especially at the edge of the tackles, it's just bad. It's not just bad; it's just thin too. And once again, it goes back to roster construction.
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, if Peters is injured, then he shouldn't be playing, right? I mean, I don't really care about him going on IR. At this point, if you're going to win, you want to win with the young kids. I don't really see what the benefit is if you're not, really kind of getting the most out of your development while winning. Like, if you're going to develop these kids and try to win, that's fine. But if you're just trying to win at the expense of your future, I'm not sure that that's the right move. And frankly, it's not working. They've played a bunch of these older guys who've taken snaps away from the younger kids, and they're losing. So what's the end game there?
But do you think that some of these younger kids have the talent to be? I know you're going to probably say, hey, you know what, you want to not to put words in your mouth, but you say you want to see what they have. But do you, in good faith, like when it comes to especially the offensive line, do you think they have the young guns that are able to go ahead and step in for there and actually not get Wentz killed, or whoever is back there at quarterback not get them killed?
I'm not saying bench Kelsey. I'm not saying bench Lane Johnson, but I think left tackle is a pretty clear transitional position for this team. They tried it with Andre Dillard. They tried it with Jordan Mailata at various times, and frankly, it worked with Mailata for the most part. They were successful with Mailata out there. Now, the other guy that I want to talk about who has turned into a pumpkin over the last 2 weeks is Travis Fulgham, right? So they didn't target him until 8:55 left in the third quarter. He went the entire first half without being targeted. Now, it's very hard to come in cold and not get targeted all game in a rainy weather situation and, not get yourself going until that third quarter when you're just running routes. He finished with one catch for 8 yards on 7 targets. He had a couple of drops at least. I would say he had 3 drops. Just looked like a shell of what we'd seen from him previously. And in the past 2 games, he's got 2 catches for 16 yards. That's alarming. I still don't think he's a flash in the pan. I don't think he's regressed. I don't think it's anything like that. I think he's seeing better coverage on defense. I think he's seeing, Denzel Ward a lot more. He's seeing top defenders. But it also kind of seems like the offense isn't game planned towards him, and I don't really get it. Jalen Reagor didn't really get targeted early on either. It seemed like they wanted to really flow through Dallas Goedert. Goddard had that beautiful 32-yard catch where Wentz looked like he was finding himself and kind of playing pretty well. He finished with 5 catches for 77 yards and a touchdown. I don't really know who their go-to guy is. It just kind of seems like Richard Rodgers finds a way to be that guy at the end of games because, I guess he just gets open, but I don't know what they're doing at wide receiver. Greg Ward was barely involved in the game plan. Alshon Jeffrey again catchless. Like what's your take on the wide receiver position? What's your take on the tight end position? Zach Ertz is in the midst of his 21-day practice window, can be activated over the next 2 weeks. Where are you at?
I think it's by design that they don't want to have that one guy from a front office aspect and then also down to a coaching level. Because I think from a front office aspect, hey, if you don't have to pay top dollar for a wide receiver, hey, it's good for your salary cap. On the actual field level, I think when it comes to receivers, having so many options and having to have a team go ahead and try to game plan for so many different people and not focus on one guy, I think that definitely is a benefit for the offense. But the problem is you have to have the right guys and get somebody getting the ball to them. I think when it comes to looking at Fulgham, I wonder if he's one of those guys where he has to be a rhythm receiver, where he has to feel involved early, have a couple passes thrown his way, and if not, he just doesn't get into the game itself. It just seems like he's that type of receiver when you see just his hand placement and just route and everything else. I wonder if he's that type of guy. As for the receiver position overall, there were some times they were actually getting open. You saw him starting to leak out. You saw him breaking his zone whenever Cleveland did go ahead and actually run his zone. You saw them actually sitting in the zones and setting up. The ball just wasn't getting to them. And that goes back to what we talked about beforehand. But I think the way this roster is, the way the receivers are right now, I have no problem with the way they're being done. They're being used and deployed. And I think I would continue doing the same way they have. As for Zach Ertz, I would go ahead and still bring him back. And it goes back once again. This is the frustrating part with this team. You see all the pieces that are there. It's like having a car. You have this, I say Porsche because you're a 3-win team, but you have this car with so many features and so much horsepower around it, and you have a driver who doesn't know how to drive stick. It's really frustrating because I'm sitting there thinking ahead to weeks ahead, thinking, wow, if you have Richard Rodgers, you have Rodgers, you have Goddard, you have Ertz coming back, and then you go ahead, you have Sanders running 13 personnel on the goal line. Should be fun. Oh, wait, who's going to throw the ball? Is it going to be picked off? I have no problem with them coming back on that one, too. Sorry, Caleb Wilson, you're not going to stick around anymore. But it's one of those things where it's just frustrating. I have no problem with the way they're working people back in. There's going to be only one football, so there's going to be a lot of options, but they just have to go ahead and use that to their advantage to go ahead and make sure not one person is schemed against. I got no problem at all. It's the old school West Coast offense way. It's the right thing to do.
I think another guy we really got to talk about is Miles Sanders, who has somehow become a fumbling machine, which I fought back against earlier on in the season, but his fumble within the 5 yard line on the first drive really set the tone for this game. The Eagles were driving. Peterson called a great game plan, really homed in on the run, and he just fumbled. He was holding the ball loose. He decided to play the game without gloves for some reason. I don't know really what that was all about, but
We can get anything delivered from furniture to toilet paper. And now, adult beverages with Drizzly. Drizzly lets you compare prices from local liquor stores on a huge selection of beer, wine, and spirits, then get them delivered right to your door in under 60 minutes. And right now, Drizzly's giving all new customers $5 off their first order. Just enter promo code EASY5 at checkout. Download the Drizzly app or go to drizzly.com. That's DRIZLY.com.
Yeah, he fumbled, and really it cost the offense points. Luckily, the defense put together a fourth down stop at the goal line, and they were able to kind of negate that turnover, but it still cost them points. Carson Wentz's pick six then led to 7 points, and the Eagles went into halftime down 7-0 when they probably could have gone to halftime either at 7-7 or 7-3, and Miles Sanders coughing up the ball is a big deal. We've talked about it before. They've talked about him as a workhorse back, but the guy can't stay healthy. The Eagles don't seem to want to use him in a regular every down role. They're not sticking to the run. It's a lot of mixed messaging, and it's almost like they want him to be an every down player when it's convenient, not just in the sake of being an every down player. And I know that sounds kind of confusing, but I don't know what Miles Sanders is to this team right now. Like, he is easily their most dynamic player, but the way this offense play calls for him and the way that he kind of returns the favor with injuries and these really terrible fumbles, it's tough because you don't know if you can invest in him the way you thought you could have entering, training camp.
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned that. We're recording this on Sunday night, so Monday you'll be able to read the story I wrote about him when it comes to Sanders being a 3-down back. But I really don't think he is, and I'm okay with that. It's okay. The Eagles can embrace the fact that he's not a 3-down back. Because I think for his long one, we've all heard about the life expectancy of a running back and all the wear and tear, the hits they take over his time. You have somebody special in Sanders, you want to preserve him as much as you can. He can still run for 1,000 yards and still not be the guy in the offense. I think they still have. I still think they can go ahead and roll through Boston Scott. I still think you can still roll through. I prefer to see Elijah Holyfield be the guy, but you can still add in Corey Clement, or if they do decide to bring Jordan Howard, add him in as well too. I mean, the Eagles, if you look at what they did last year, by that committee, I mean, you had Darren Sproles time. They were averaging 4.3 yards a carry when they decided to go ahead and stick with the run, which is very good. And the Eagles if the Eagles decide to go back with that, I don't know if it's one of those things where they made a promise, say, hey, you know what, you're going to be the 3-down guy heading into this year. We think you're going to be the workhorse back, but it's not working out. And I don't know what's going on with his hands. I mean, he's had the drops. He had 5 drops this year. He has 5 drops this year so far, which is 2 off of what he had last year already. And we're still in the middle of the season, and he's fumbling the ball. I don't know what's going on with this. I don't know if he needs to work on his hand placement more. The whole no gloves thing is okay. If you make sure you tape your fingers with it, that's okay. But if you're just wearing no gloves just to wear no gloves, nah, you can't do that. And now, teams, that's on tape now, that you're going and fumbling the ball and you're dropping the ball left and right. They're going to go after you no matter what. You become a liability, a la Zeke did earlier this season. So I don't know why the Eagles feel like they have to force him to be the guy the whole entire time, but they need to change that philosophy, and they need to change it fast in order to save him.
I agree. From a positive standpoint, I know it's kind of hard to do as we hit the 30-minute mark. Look, Alex Singleton, I thought looked legit star linebacker in this game. He played the run very, very well. I thought he was extremely impressive. He had 11 tackles, a sack, and a fumble recovery. He was just everywhere in this game. Really, really looked good. The Eagles defense came into this game with a directive that they had to stop Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. And I think it was like midway through the third quarter, they held him to 22 yards on 17 carries. Eventually the dam broke because the Eagles defense was on the field way too long and the offense wasn't really paying anything off. Who was the guy that really stood out to you in this game? Positively.
Well, I think Josh Sweat once again. I think the moves the quickness he's displaying from the outside and getting pressure. I thought that was very great.
Those hands,
just man, he's violent. He plays violent, and that's why I like as well too. I mean, you hear Brandon Graham as a motor. He rushes violently, and I like that because you need to be aggressive when you're going around that pass rush. But you mentioned Singleton. I thought he played very well, and I think he's warranted enough to start the rest of the season because as much as this Jim Schwartz seems to love Nate Gary, he's coming back to the starting lineup. So I figure at this point you might as well put. I feel more comfortable if Singleton was covering a linebacker, so I put him into strong side. Have Gary worry about just trying to find the ball at the weak side linebacker. Have TJ Edwards being your starting linebacker for the rest of the season because that might be your best chance at playing for the linebackers to contribute and continue playing well. But I mean, you give credit where credit is due, and Roseman found him, and it's one of the bright spots he's done so far. So he's done well on that one. But I really think, getting back to the original point, Josh Sweat is looking like he's going to be it's somebody I wouldn't mind having for the next couple of years on your defensive line. How about you? Anybody else stood out for you?
Yeah, I will mention Nate Gary is eligible to return from IR this week, just to give you some thoughts on that. Yeah, Isaac Seumalo. I thought Isaac Seumalo made this run game hum right at the beginning. I thought he was getting great push. He wasn't, I mean, look, the offensive line didn't do all that well pass blocking, but I didn't really expect them to. I think Seumalo made a huge difference in the running game. Massive upgrade over Nate Herbig and Sua Opeta. Matt Pryor's just not an NFL guard. I don't really. Yeah, that's another one. But look, right now we're recording this, at 9:30 on a Sunday. The Eagles have a half game lead in the NFC East.
I'm sorry.
Every team in the NFC East has 3 wins. The Cowboys beat the Vikings. Washington beat the Bengals. The Giants were on bye. And here's the thing, too. Everybody in the division owns a win over the Eagles except for the Cowboys, and they'll have a rematch in Week 16. If you're one of those fans that really just wants them to get a high draft pick and not win the division, I think you're feeling pretty good about your chances right now. Look, I think the Giants have done some really good things. I was really impressed by them last week. The Cowboys played pretty well against the Vikings today. Depending on how you feel about the Vikings. And then, look, I think Washington's got the best solo unit in the league, in the division, as far as one side of the ball. They've got the best defense easily. I think as Alex Smith continues to get more comfortable after the injury and continues to lead that team, I think they've got a shot too. Listen, the Eagles want to be division winners for a second consecutive season. I don't really blame them because it hasn't been done since 2004. So obviously there's that draw, but here's the thing. If they do want to win the division and keep that stronghold in the division, they need to beat Seattle next week. And I don't really think this is a team that can beat Seattle. So as bad as Seattle's defense is, I just don't see it. Maybe I'll feel differently later on the week. It is a night game, as we said. So if the Eagles feel like vampires still, maybe they get that win. It's a Monday night game, which means that Sunday, they'll be chilling, watching TV and probably watching the Giants. But yeah, I mean, it's their last night game of the season unless that Washington game really comes down to the wire and decides who wins the NFC East. But they have no more. I guess the positive news is they only have one more 1:00 game, and that's the Washington game. But if they're doing well enough to contend, that'll probably be flexed to 4:00. So positives. Anyway, Chris, what are your final thoughts on this game? Oh man.
Remember truffles?
Yeah, truffles.
I didn't see any truffles, and it was just everything else that truffles were grown in. It really was. And
oh, that was good. Good job.
thank you. I appreciate it. You set me up. You inspired, put it that way.
Oh,
but when it comes to this, it's just you run out of adjectives when it comes to just the way this team is thinking. And you mentioned Seattle. And it is not a way to do that. I mean, don't get me wrong. There's still a way that they can win 6 wins. I still think they can get. There's a way outside chance they can get to it now, but I still think they're going to contend to way just this division, and I still think that it's important that Peterson doesn't lose his team because you still have so many young players in important positions along both sides of the line. You want to go ahead and not set that expectation up to just give up afterwards. So I want to see how Doug bounces back, and I want to see what these captains do. Because even one of them continues to jump off sides. Brandon Graham continues to jump off sides and says we got to clean stuff up. I mean, where do you go from there? It's just bad, man. What are your final thoughts?
8 captains, 3 wins. Who cares? Like, seriously, like I understand. Look, leadership is an interesting thing in sports, right? We make a big deal out of it, but frankly, the leadership here is failing in all regards. Carson Wentz is a leader. Rodney McLeod didn't look very good in this game. Who else is a captain? Duke Riley has made a nice play on special teams. Good for him. Craig James is sidelined on IR. Like Jason Kelsey and Brandon Graham are good leaders. I'm not trying to like discount them, but you got Jason Peters leaving every other play. Like it's just. At some point, accountability needs to be on you. You need to, we use the phrase, look yourself in the mirror. Well, at this point, the mirror has so many smudges that it's hard to, you're like, you ever see Beauty and the Beast where like he's afraid to look in the mirror because he looks, I may be misremembering this wrong, but like there's like an old mirror.
Disney reference.
Yeah, you got to get one. There's like an old mirror and it's like really smudged. Like that's what it is right now. And listen, look, I thought the defense played well. I just like they can't put this thing together. And frankly, if I'm evaluating coaches, I think Jim Schwartz has done a better job this season than Doug Peterson has. If I'm looking at individual units, like this offense has not been good. You look at what they've done as a group. I believe off the top of my head, hold on. I got my handy dandy laptop right in front of me. They've eclipsed 30 points 0 times this season. 0 times. 0 times, Chris.
How many times?
0 times. I actually did that 4. I think I did that 4 times, but they've eclipsed 30 0 times. Doug Peterson's considered this offensive wizard and quarterback guru. But I got to tell you, when you're points per game looks like this: week 1, 17, week 2, 19, week 3, 23, week 4, 25, week 5, 29, week 6, 28, week 7, 22, week 8, 23, week 10, 17, week 11, 17. Their 2 highest scoring games are in losses. This is just like they've also won their games, their 3 wins. They've won by 20 points combined. Like, this is a team that's just not good. And you can blame it on roster depth and money and all that stuff. But frankly, with how well and respected Doug Peterson is, this team is just not performing. And a lot of their top talent is on the field. Like, it just... This is the second most expensive roster in the league, and Howie Roseman deserves a ton of blame for the way it's shaped. But you hire a head coach for a reason, and you have a head coach who won a Super Bowl, who's been to 3 consecutive playoff appearances, and this team just has no answers. They're dumbfounded. And frankly, as somebody who's an objective observer who has no skin in the game, it's perplexing to me to try to explain this to an audience when they're searching for answers, because frankly, it's hard for me to compartmentalize everything that's going on with this team because they are so. Look, I've covered terrible teams before. I've covered some really bad Jaguars teams. This is a team that thinks it's good, and there's a portion of the fan base that thinks it's good, but in truth, they are not very good. And they're only set up by the division because this division's terrible. If this was any other division, we would be doing mock drafts and all this other stuff. And frankly, I'll be doing my first mock draft this upcoming weekend for your delight. But
quick question. I'm sorry, real quick question. How many times?
0 times.
Thank you. I just wanted to
guys, you can sign up for Eagles Extra at NJ.com/text. You can download the No Huddle Show podcast wherever podcasts are available. For Chris, the Truffle King, I'm Mike. We are sorry. Thanks for listening.
Thanksgiving. You've got your stuffing, your gravy, and of course your turkey. But what about the drinks? Don't panic. Just use Drizzly, the #1 app for alcohol delivery. Drizzly lets you compare prices from local liquor stores on a huge selection of beer, wine, and spirits, then get them delivered right to your door in under 60 minutes. And right now, Drizzly is giving all new customers $5 off their first order. Just enter the promo code GOBBLE at checkout. Download the Drizzly app or go to drizzly.com. That's DRIZLY.com.